how smart is L? In a way that is dumbed down and digestible. If such a question has entered your mind, you've come to the right video. We'll be diving deep into L's past and present in the world of Death Note, to have you truly understand why he was deserving of the title Greatest Detective. After all, L managed to tackle the irrationality of metaphysics or the supernatural and rationalized it for his detective case, and even us, the viewers, to understand. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy Death Note content. We'll be tackling new perspectives you may or may not have heard before, things regarding L's writing and depth, alongside hidden feats in a structured format. And we'll even be offering some Death Note upscales in their intelligence, including light, so it won't just be L in this video. So, let's see how smart L truly is. On October 31st, 1979, a child was dropped from heaven. That child would be named L. As of this video's recording, we have no information regarding L's biological parents. All we know is that they died while he was young, and he became an orphan. At 8 years old, he encountered Watari, who decided to adopt him and take him into Wami's house. It's unknown if L was actually born in the United Kingdom or elsewhere, but either way, he had gained a new home. However, L wasn't an easy child to raise. In the Wami House one-shot manga, Watari reveals to the reader that within 1 hour, L had already gotten into a fight and knocked down all the orphans. Based? He was so problematic that Watari had to isolate him from the other children. In L's own words, "They used violence against me. They are the ones who started it. I am justice." A lot of fans write off this scene as a funny little gag or tweak out over how Kid L was so strong. But I think there's a deeper meaning. It's supposed to represent L's unique viewpoint of justice, which he carries into adulthood. It won't make sense if I explain it here, so we will revisit it during the part in which L confronts Light for the first time. Originally, Watari created Wami's house with the intention of gathering highly intelligent children and nurturing them to excel in their respective fields. Watari had the same intent with L, but he was different. He didn't just understand what he was taught, he improved upon it, and ultimately mastered the Wami's house curriculum as time went on. This curriculum involves the gathering of the greatest professors in their own respective fields in the world, who travel to the orphanage and teach the children. L showed more interest in solving complex puzzles, however, but that eventually outgrew him, so he requested access to a computer, which was still an emerging piece of tech. Watari obliged and gave L his own computer, which he would work on for hours on end. Eventually, L gave Watari some investment advice, requesting that he purchase £1 million in Japanese yen. Too many, including ourselves, yes, we, would just laugh off such a request, let alone refuse to even entertain the idea of an 8-year-old child giving us stock market advice. But that sort of logic can't be applied to L. He was literally built differently, and Watari's not stupid. He's been closely watching L since his arrival in the orphanage, and documented his talents in his diary, specifically his entries on February 23rd, 1987, and July 10th, 1994. Both entries mention L, with the former referring to the boy as talented, but being more so of an unknown variable, to having Watari glaze him up and outright saying he is the most interested in L. But is Watari's diary even canon? Well, it's complicated. The diary was created for lore purposes regarding the Death Note live-action films, most notably to give a bit of insight on the main antagonist in L Change the World, K, a former student from Wami's house who escapes to become a bioterrorist. Aside from the information regarding K, at the very least the contents of the journal should still be canon to the series, specifically the diary entries that range from May 7th, 1973 to August 13th, 2005. This is because the 70s to the 90s are quite literally a blank slate in the world of Death Note. We have no official information from the authors regarding what went on during this time, aside from character births or Light winning his junior high and high school tennis tournaments in 1999 and 2000. And minus that, we do know that L had many cases in his career along with the BB murder case. Later events are obviously non-canon though, because the CTW timeline is completely different from the original timeline. Thanks to L's financial knowledge, within just 2 years' time, Watari's assets grew by 20,000 times. Such growth in stocks is unheard of, especially during the late 80s. So what did L have Watari invest in? Obviously we can't be sure, but we can hypothesize and theorize using real-life examples. I'll make this as easy to understand as possible, since a topic that is heavy on investing in the stock market can be pretty complicated. Firstly, we have L asking Watari to exchange Japanese yen into British pounds. This is already a sign that L was paying attention to how the different currencies of the world were changing in value. This could be taken advantage of, and is something that he noted before making the decision to invest. He also specifically said buy £1 million with Japanese yen, alongside other stocks to purchase as he instructed Watari. But what stocks did L invest in? Well, they were likely briefly Japanese. It shouldn't be that far-fetched, as he literally asks Watari to turn British pounds into yen. Whammies is located in Winchester, England, and you'd need yen if you wanted to invest in Japanese stocks. During the late 1980s, Japan was going through a massive economic boom, most notably with the surge of stock prices related to tech and electronic companies. Things like early computers, home electronics, and computer chips. They were slowly gaining popularity, which is why L most likely invested in stocks that involved companies that were fast-growing and introducing new tech to the world. Some of the strongest candidates for the tech company stock that L bought include Sony, Panasonic, NEC, Hitachi, and Toshiba. Sony was leading the tech race around the time, producing items like Walkmans, and Panasonic was also known for its audio equipment. NEC played a massive role in the early introduction of computers and semiconductors, even going as far as to dominate Japan's PC market at one point in time. Lastly, Toshiba was another electronics company that just helped power Japan's tech boom. At the time, they were basically the backbone of the tech world. The list could include other companies, but these ones seem to be the most likely, and it's just fun to theorize. However, it's important to note that just because I applied real history to L's investment journey, it does not make it any more realistic. Going from 0 to a 20,000 times return on investment is basically impossible, especially if we apply normal stock market investing logic. A more realistic number is a 2 or 3 times ROI, return on investment, and if we just upscale it to the max, at most it would be between 50 to 1,000 times. But 20,000 is just out of this world. To put it into perspective, this is literally going from a million to 20 billion in just 2 years. This does not happen from just buying stocks. But Death Note as a whole is unrealistic, so we'll humor this even more. What moves would L have to make in order to raise his portfolio that high? Well, for starters, he'd need extreme leverage, aka borrowing tons of money. This isn't hard, as Watari was already rich prior to founding Whammy's house, and L's a genius. He could raise funds through hundreds of ways. But it gets harder when you realize that L would have to make perfect predictions about the market, bet against stock market crashes at the exact right time, and take advantage of multiple opportunities back to back with 0 mistakes. The most notable stock market crash that L would have to overcome would be Black Monday, which occurred on October 19th, 1987. Worldwide losses were estimated to be at $1.7 trillion, and L would be one of the only few investors on the planet to overcome the loss and profit from it, and this was in USD. Simply put, you need to have beyond human level comprehension of finance to even remotely pull off what L did. Keep in mind that L did this between the ages of 8 to 10. His brain was equivalent to that of a fetus, and his knowledge was nowhere near to what it is during part 1 of Death Note. He was still acquiring new knowledge with each passing day as time went on, and yet he was intelligent enough to make Watari a multi-billionaire in less than 2 years. Some people even make further connections to L's wealth through scaling his investments plus purchases and his status. This all adds up to possibly being $100+ billion, but this is really just a lowball because it's not taking into account that L probably invested more with Watari later on. L is also paid money for cases to solve, stated in the BB Murder Cases novel by Nisio Isin. The minimum amount for L to solve a case, if you hire him, is $1 million. He sold 3,500 cases, so even 500 of these could be worth 500 million. Yeah, 500. L only finds cases interesting if there's a bag or the case itself is interesting, as revealed in the Death Note final chapters, where it shows L talking to the Whammy House students, explaining he does cases for fun rather than out of some idea of justice. As for a real estimate of his wealth, I've seen $400 billion or more in some calcs if we take it to its max. Now, I don't want to make you guys sit through me bag scaling, as funny as that sounds, since I'm really just pocket watching. But if you really want to, see it like this. Bruce Wayne net worth? Well, L probably scales to that, or someone like Tony Stark. As crazy as it sounds, it really is possible considering the goofiness of his original investments. While I do make a joke of that, just really consider how crazy that is, and he's not guessing at random. Narratively, he should be knowing what he's doing. The reason L's achievement from 8 years old being able to do this should be pointed out, as it's a basic example of showing how impressive L actually is. Outside of logic puzzles, he can make real-world results happen. This also ties into a deeper narrative behind L seeking power and dominance over whatever he goes after. L, frankly, is a control freak. It's why he must hold authority when running things. This is deserved, of course, due to his insane intelligence, especially in the realm of academics. Well, I have a lot to say. L is familiar with a lot. A top polymath, might I add. Whammy's house's curriculum brings the most advanced lecturers in the world, and it's stated time and time again that they are given advanced work to do. This would include languages, political science, computer science, mathematics, physics, and social sciences, which include economics and psychology alongside sociology. This is said in the CTW novel. Canonicity is not reliable for the CTW novel, and sadly it can't be used, but these claims can be supported by canon actually, and at least inferred from. Even Whammy House and L One Day can be seen as non-canon by many people, as they were released in File 13. I actually do hope that we get some canonicity confirmation for CTW, as a lot of Whammy House lore is in there. However, what we can do is use the claims that CTW gives and see if they're real or not. It's stated in Death Know How to Read 13 that graduates of the program work in various fields, including investigation and the arts. This can encompass a wide array of things, beyond the normal liberal arts, like architecture or painting, as proven by Linda being a successful artist in Death Note. Political science is obvious, as shown through Nier's later involvement with the CIA and FBI, and he's just L on a lesser level. L is also shown to be a worldwide detective, meaning involving knowledge on political affairs of many countries. L is also compared to 5 investigative bureaus and 7 intelligence agencies in intellect when discussed in the BB Murder Cases novel. L is at a position where he can't be taken down nor found, as his anonymity is so advanced that clearly no intelligence agencies ever even managed to track his identity. L is fluent in many languages as well. This is proven by his English heritage as British, and he can speak Japanese. Ohba stated that L's heritage is 1/4 Japanese, 1/4 English, 1/4 Russian, and 1/4 French or Italian. However, his heritage doesn't outright mean he can speak those said languages, but there is a case to be made. First, we have his feat within the CTW novel, being able to watch 50 plus monitors and intake their audio in various languages. However, again, Change the World is to be questioned on its canonicity, and if it could truly be used to scale a canon L. But we don't need CTW once again to prove this claim. The second case to be made is that you actually have to analyze L's various detective codes, that being Araldo Coil and Deneuve. These aren't made up names for the sake of it. As you may remember, L said that he held the top 3 detective codes, L, Araldo Coil, and Deneuve. This was revealed in the Yotsuba arc. However, what many don't know is that he stole these detective codes after a quote-unquote detective war ensued, which was reported in the BB Murder Cases novel. These were actually people who held their title at one point, and if you look at their names, Araldo Coil and Deneuve, they clearly aren't Japanese or English. Araldo Coil is possibly Italian or French. This means to operate as Araldo Coil, he would be speaking in these languages. And it's not odd to assume that L is a polyglot or someone who knows many languages, as if you work worldwide and are involved in political affairs, you would be familiar. Deneuve is also a bit French, though that's only speculation. Learning many languages wouldn't be that insane for L to do, by the way, considering his learning adaptability, which is pretty stupid. More proof for L's academics, if you don't want to take anything I've said so far, we have him literally competing with Light in scores at the entrance exam for Toa University, or University of Tokyo in English. Light and L both scored 100% perfect scores in the Tokyo University. Tokyo University is currently ranked 36th or so in the world. However, the entrance exam that one must pass to enter would be considered one of the most challenging tests among universities globally. You are required to take exams in 5 different subjects, and English, history, and Japanese are mandatory. You can choose the science subject you want to take, but all of them are at a very high level. If you score 250 out of 500, you will probably pass. But L scored 500 out of 500. Some questions in the exam are even challenging for some professors. The average score for Todai students on the test, in which L ranked number 1, was 93%. However, half of the students who scored 93% or higher on that test failed Todai's exam. L effortlessly achieves a perfect score on the hardest examination in Japan. There's even a case to be made that L wasn't even trying that hard, as Light neither took it that seriously and had arrived late, as he was confident it was going to be a breeze. Light was flipping through pages nonchalantly. L seems to be taking it not that seriously, as he's busy psychoanalyzing Light. And since Light didn't try that hard, it's also most likely the case for L to not be trying that hard. For comparison, I'm going to bring up a real-life example, and please stick through, as this massively upskills L and even Light. Gento Kuno, often referred to as one of Japan's smartest individuals, who also won the quiz show Zun-O, which is a competition specifically designed to test the highest levels of thinking, memory, and problem solving, also entered the University of Tokyo with the highest exam score in his year. When he later attempted the SAT, he achieved a perfect score in significantly less time than the average student in America without the use of a calculator, which is standard in Japanese exam settings. While universities like Cambridge or MIT may have more specialized or technically academically demanding entrance exams, the Tokyo University's entrance exam remains one of the most competitive and intellectually demanding exams in the world. On top of that, Japan also uses the Kyutsu test, or common test, as a benchmark. If your score isn't high enough, you don't have the skill it takes for the University of Tokyo's entrance exams. Which, fun fact, this is what Light showed his mother at the start of Death Note and places first place in, albeit being the mock exam for it, but it is designed to simulate the real one. Hence how L knew he was the smartest high schooler in Japan, as most students take it, and it's safe to say he got first place for the official one as well. So despite its global rankings sitting around the mid-30s, it remains one of the hardest exams in the world, and L got a perfect score with no prior study. Recently, Tokyo Uni also had AI surpass human scores, scoring 503 out of 550, and the other AI models scoring a bit lower, and yet L still scored a perfect score, same as Light. These models aren't even at their peak yet, as of 2026, but nonetheless, ChatGPT is scored at least 150 plus IQ, according to many people, with its lacking traits being its lack of EQ naturally. However, if you want to extrapolate this more, AI is a collective unconscious of some sorts, due to its full operating factor being a collection of data and info from the internet, which itself is a reflection of history and the mind. Not going to go too much into it, but I'll talk about it more in the future. From what my friend Nucha, who's Japanese, has said, even in Japan, people who get into Tokyo Uni, especially the unit of Medicine 3, are jokingly called aliens. It reflects how insanely competitive that level is. In some of the most academically rigorous high schools, it's not unusual for only the single top student in an entire cohort to make it in, and even that might only happen once every couple of years. To elaborate on how smart this man is, and in comparison how smart L and even Light should be realistically, Gento successfully learns the Hangul writing system and basic Korean vocabulary from scratch within just 2 days of study. Funny enough, after he learns Korean in 2 days, he attempts to take the common test in Korea where there is a question called the killer question, for which there is only a 3% chance of getting it right. He manages to get a perfect score for all, including the killer question. He also did the same for the Chinese writing system and the common test, getting a passing score for both. Furthermore, he's considered a polymath, as he is the 2-time record holder for Japan's smartest man. As for a fun fact, he started learning mathematics at age 1 and solved complex problems before any of his peers. That said, he never got a perfect score for the Tokyo University's entrance exams. What this implies is that L, and by extension Light, who weren't even trying at the time, can easily achieve the feats Gento has shown, as he is a realistic measure of intelligence in our real world. Any smart character, even low tiers in fiction, are leagues ahead of anything a normal person can achieve. So Light, who is no means a low tier, one of the smartest, and L, who is even smarter, would dominate anyone who tries to face them in real life. Now, going back to why getting a perfect score in Tokyo Uni is insane, the highest record holder for it is 489 out of 550 for its score. It's considered impossible to get a perfect score. Even the average cutoff is 395 out of 550, and those people are considered aliens. A perfect score would mean your cognition or IQ cannot be measured via typical standards. And if you also remember that Minoru in the Death Note one-shot got a score of 142 for his IQ, and yet a perfect score would mean your IQ cannot be measured by typical standards. Light was also bored and on a unique educational program when getting first for the common test, which is scaled to 1,000 points, again getting 100% for uni. This man's limits for academics alone seem to have no ceiling, and passes anything without effort. And L, whose only motive was to catch or getting a read on Kira, got 100% without trying as well. Big shout out to Nucha for helping me with the Japanese context for the exams and levels that they are at, alongside the info on Kuno Gento, as Nucha is Japanese himself, as I said. So go show him love and subscribe as he tackles things like Saiki K, series like Death Note 2, alongside JoJo's and other shonen. So with all that being said, you have non-detective environments for L, and he's showing prowess in anything he takes on, by scaling him to Light, which he overscales above Light, by the way. L even manages to fly a helicopter later on, in which he states all you have to do is use your intuition. L is clearly an advanced polymath. Anyways, long tangent aside, L's education is advanced, and I don't want people saying otherwise because the evidence is there. Beyond Birthday in the BB Case novel also showed an example of highly advanced physics and chemistry, and his education being PhD level wouldn't be stupid to say, as the case was so impossible that only L could solve it. Investigative agencies like the CIA or FBI couldn't solve it, as Naomi comes from the branch of the FBI, and this case's mission was designed to L, who couldn't solve it either. So again, insane. Sadly, we don't have an example of L's philosophy level of education, as that would be pretty meta on some Lelouch type stuff, but you can infer that he obviously would have a grasp. Anyways, back to the one-shot. I did go off a bit, but I just need to bring this up outside of L's detective cases, as he is highly capable and once again the most advanced polymath. The L one-shot ends with Watari revealing that after several years had passed, L finally found the field of study that he wanted to focus on, criminology, specifically being a detective. After witnessing a case that not even the police could solve, L's eyes began to sparkle. At long last, he had found his path. The path that Watari would faithfully walk alongside. The path, no, the journey to become the greatest detective in the world. However, what age was L when he started to take detective work seriously? Luckily, we have Watari's diary to fill in the gaps that the manga refuses to elaborate on. As per the diary entry, on July 10th, 1994, L showed great enthusiasm with the prospect of using his own statistics to make deductions regarding criminal investigations. By this date, L would be 15 years old, just 1 year older than Mello was, coincidentally enough. However, the most interesting bit of information is Watari's statement about L using his own methods to make deductions. This isn't confirmed, but I believe it's referring to L's infamous percentage gauge that he uses throughout the series. For context, whenever L is doing detective work, he often throws out a percentage to gauge the probability of something being true or false. However, the percentages are unusually low, so nobody pays them much. However, this is specifically meant to be a misdirection. It's stated in Death Know How to Read that anytime L throws out a number of any kind, it means he suspects a person by over 90%. He just makes them lower in order to lower people's guard and make them feel less suspicious, which makes them more prone to slip up. And this really puts into perspective of how ahead of the curve L was regarding all of this. Aside from the aforementioned information, we also have the feat of an 8-year-old L solving a case that would have led to the start of World War III. But you've heard this numerous times on this channel. To specifically note, it's preventing the bombings that would have led to World War III, as many people always say he solved World War III or stopped it as if he was doing it while it was happening. That's a misconception, just to point it out. Before we get into the bread and butter, that being part 1 of Death Note, we also need to talk about L's potential, because as I said earlier, it is literally limitless. It's stated in the LABB murder case novel that in 2002, L's intellect was equivalent to that of 5 ordinary investigative bureaus and 7 intelligence agencies. By the time he took on the Kira case, it had already risen several notches. But just how much is several notches? Well, again, it's not directly stated, but we can use a sort of inference to figure this out. Notches could also refer to levels or steps, so 1 notch is equivalent to 1 step. If L's intelligence increases by several notches, the number then varies. Several generally refers to a quantity that is no less than 3, but no more than 7, or just between 3 to 7. The space between the start of the BB murder case and the start of the Kira case is just 1 year and 5 months, which means that L's intellect grew anywhere from 3 to 7 times higher than before. In just the span of a year and a few months, which is insane. Although intelligence growth is rapid, it's just insane in the case of L because he is already at peak genius. You'd think that someone of his caliber would reach a sort of plateau and could only acquire knowledge rather than grow intellectually. So the fact that a Kira case L is far smarter than a BB murder case L really says a lot about his talents. In fact, earlier on, L was such a prodigy that Watari added a new goal to Wami's house, which was the successor program. Orphans could now go down 2 paths. They could either train to become a successor to L, or just excel in a field of study that they choose. It's not surprising that Watari was enamored with L's talents and wanted him to take on a successor, as the world quite literally needed a L. He had solved over 3,500 cases prior to the Kira case, which prevented future crimes and murders in an unquantifiable number. Focus on that line. Preventing crime on a level that is actually affecting the world. By no means is he stopping crime or even a cycle of evil, but he for sure is putting in the good reps. But I say to focus on this as it will come into a deeper narrative that not many people speak about, which I'll bring up in the Kira case section. He's also stated to be handling cases at the same damn time. In the novel, it brought a good question. How else could he maintain his reputation as the world's greatest detective? That is actually something you should ponder on. Holding 3 detective codes who are solving several cases, which really is a lowball, but if you take that as the actual number being several, they are still not on a normal level of difficulty. Difficult. The type that will cause intelligence agencies and law enforcement to be stuck on, and L manages to perform at this level non-stop, without burning out. He is so productive that he managed to solve all of that while only being 23 to 24 years old pre-Kira case. We have now concluded the section regarding L's past, and going over a bit of his academics. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's get into the actual feats of intelligence he displays during part 1 of Death Note, aka the case that put L to his death. On December 4th, 2003, at a ICPO meeting, the top police investigative bureaus of the world discuss how they should go about solving this Kira case that has come up. After arguing amongst themselves for countless minutes, they make the decision to bring in L. Shuichiro proceeds to give Matsuda the law drop on who L is and what he represents, but is interrupted by Watari, who is also present at the meeting. He announces that L is already involved. So you gave him aura beforehand with the law drop, and now he's already involved, just more aura. This shouldn't be, well, that all surprising to the viewer, as at the end of Death Note's first chapter, L straight up says, "Well, this is one case where I'm going to need some help from the police." Which implies that he was already aware of the killings and doing his own investigation in the background. L is a prideful detective who likes to work alone, only getting involved with the police if it will benefit his casework. He also refuses to fill them in on the details regarding how he'll tackle the case, taking a sort of show but don't tell approach. This presentation of sorts involves having a stand-in by the name of Lindell Taylor appear on live television, publicly mocking and denouncing Kira's actions, calling him evil. This leads to Light writing Lindell Taylor's name in the notebook, but that is exactly what L wanted. He reveals that not only was the person he just killed a criminal scheduled to die today, but by killing said criminal, he's revealed to him that he's in the Kanto region of Japan. With a strategy as simple as public provocation, L has outdone every single police agency in the world, and narrowed down the search for Kira from a staggering 6 billion to now tens of millions. Obviously, the latter amount is still a lot, but it's far better because L can now focus on one region as opposed to the entire world. But then that begs the question, did L know all along that Kira was in Japan? Well, not exactly. L's intuition, combined with a hypothesis, made him inclined to believe that Kira could be in Japan. It was a combination of things, involving psychology and pattern recognition. But the most important fact to cling on to is that a majority of the killings occurred in Japan, and were heart attack based. This all stems from the random death of Kuro Otahara, a man who held a nursery hostage before he randomly died from a heart attack. L believes that this death was a sort of test for Kira, and kick-started his spree of kills. Even stranger, the man's name and face was made public, a piece of information that L remembers. However, I want to briefly cut away from the intellectual side of things and dip into a bit of analysis, specifically with L's parting words towards Light. The two both declare that they will hunt each other down and see to it that they are disposed of, declaring themselves as justice. Anyway, once again, L uses the word justice. But why? What does justice mean to L? It seems like it's a straightforward answer since L takes down criminals, but it's a bit more deeper than that. L isn't a virtuous individual. He sees himself as a monster, incapable of things that we humans consider normal. Even detective work is nothing more than a game to him. He doesn't do it for the sake of upholding justice or punishing bad people. That's just an added positive that makes him out to be a good guy. A sort of mask, if you will. In actuality, L solves cases for the literal love of the game. Complex cases cure the itch that he needs, or in simpler words, stimulates his brain which needs a challenge. L is a genius, and can't be satisfied with simple endeavors. He needs something out of this world to push him to his limits, and have him feel any semblance of happiness. Whether or not you believe this makes L evil is totally up to you, but it certainly does make him less heroic than the world claims him to be. Being bored reminds you of someone, doesn't it? But then this seemingly opens a bigger can of worms. If L knows that he isn't justice, why does he proclaim himself as justice? Well, it's for two reasons. As I said earlier, L claims to oppose Kira's fanaticism for the sake of true, untainted justice, but is simply a mask to cover his true desire of winning the game and solving the puzzle. Stated in the final chapters of Death Note, where he only solved cases for fun rather than justice, end quote. L uses his power to stand at the top of the world, and has ultimate control over law enforcement agencies. If L wants, he could order them to do anything, if he really needs it. L is so needed due to his reputation of solving thousands of cases and being unmatched. Now, isn't it strange when someone comes claiming justice, L feels challenged? More like the challenge of pride and power. I will go into this more later into the video regarding L's morality. The second reason, though more theoretical, is that L may have proclaimed himself to be justice in order to taunt Light. L is aware of Kira's MO, which is to target violent and top-tier criminals. However, by calling himself Justice, L is insulting him and stating that what he is doing is wrong. But more importantly, it sways the hearts and minds of the people, and lets them know that the government is against Kira's actions, which tanks the public image he was just trying to build up. I also say government because L is a symbol to the government, as the greatest detective in the world. Also, a few panels prior, L threatens to give Kira the death sentence, which again is something that Kira views as righteous when it comes to dealing with criminals. After all, if Kira can become a mass murderer and dish out his own justice onto evil, then L can do the same. No? So in summary, it's all a mind game. L knows that by publicly mocking Kira, he can possibly push him to make more mistakes, which will lead to his identity being uncovered. It's also a lie, however, since L knows that deep down he isn't Justice. He just uses it as a mask, hence why his face is shadowed. Not just to hide his identity, but to show the inner conflict within L. There's also just a lack of passion in his facial features, as he looks far more calmer than Light, as opposed to the anime counterpart, which actually makes him look a bit more angry. Although Light is motivated to change the world, he knows that he can't create a new world with L in his way, so he has to figure out a way to get his real name and kill him. This leads Light to switch up his killing routine, which many people found to be stupid. I can understand it to a degree, but you need to remember that Light wanted L to catch on to him. He wants L to get close, and once he gets close enough, he can kill him. He can't do that by hiding in his room and killing criminals. It doesn't take long for L to connect the dots and realize that Kira not only has access to police information, but he's able to control the time of death. This leads L to narrow the search down to all the 141 police officers involved in the Kira case. So from millions to now 141, even though Light did give him the information, it's still pretty insane. But obviously, L can't monitor every single family himself, and so he enlists the help of the FBI to hire agents to watch the families from afar and report about any suspicious details. Now, if not for Ryuk snitching to Light that he was being followed, it's very likely that Ray Pemba could have caught Light eventually down the line. We'll never know, however, though, because the second Light caught wind of the fact that he was being watched, he proceeded to concoct a plan that resulted in the deaths of all the FBI agents. The loss of the FBI support really deals the damage to L. Even worse for L, he's been humiliated. Light sent him multiple messages with no sort of meaning, such as a pentagram drawn in blood and written notes that said, "L, do you know? Gods of death love apples." As I stated before, they mean nothing. But L is the type to obsess over every small detail, and so he's going to overthink the meaning behind the information in front of him. This leads L to be susceptible to losing focus on what's actually at hand, which is how Light was able to kill everyone without much hassle. L is so rattled by this defeat that he actually shows emotion and begins to sweat for the first time ever in the series, and pretty much the only time ever in the whole series. This is a loss for L because it forces him to reveal his face to the remaining members of the police force, in order to regain their trust and build a team that is capable of following his orders and taking down Kira. However, it's not a total loss for L, as his previous deduction regarding Kira's ability to not only control the time of death, but also manipulate a person's actions before death was also confirmed. L knows that all he has to do is bide his time, because eventually Kira will make his way to him. L predicts that Kira will want to be a part of these meetings in order to get close to him. Sricho also notes that L must have also predicted this same thing happening, so really losing trust for the police force and then whittling it down to a small amount of people that actually trust L was kind of a part of his plan too. So it's really a win-win for both parties, I guess. L meets with the task force and presents his insane psychoanalysis on Kira, breaking down his philosophy and thought process to a T. It's an insane feat, considering the fact that L hasn't even spoken to Kira yet, and only interacted with him through a scene. He figures this out not just due to his actions, but due to how similar Kira is to himself. He is cocky, hates to lose, sees himself as justice, and when challenged responds with an even greater challenge of his own. It's certainly easier to psychoanalyze someone who probably has a lot of similar to yourself, but it's still hard for a person you've never actually met. So props to L. One thing to note is L's constant bringing up of Kira and him being similar isn't done just for some plot-induced reasons for some cat and mouse. It's a part of his literal psychology embedded in it. His willingness to commit evil to win, which we'll go into later. And remember what he said. Kira has a childish view of right and wrong. What does this tell us about L, who beat up kids in Wami's house and proclaimed justice? L then locks in on the deaths of the FBI agents, specifically Ray Penba, but notices a discrepancy. Ray was on the train for 1.5 hours, but the Yamanote line is only 1 hour. In the surveillance footage, Ray also entered with an envelope, but exited without it. Based on the security footage and the aforementioned events, L believes that Kira was on the train. Even stranger, he gets confirmation of Naomi Masora's apparent suicide, but finds it odd. Why would such a strong-willed woman end her life? It doesn't make sense on paper, as she dearly loved her husband. L knows Naomi Masora better than anyone. If she were still around, she'd work day and night to figure out who killed Ray. He can't prove it yet, but Kira is somehow involved. He knows it's Kira, but he can't prove it yet. He decides to focus on Ray Penba, which leads to him focusing on the families that Ray was investigating, the Kitamura family and the Sricho Yagami family. This infuriates Sricho, but L quickly calms him down by saying that the chance of Kira being within one of the families is only 5%, though he initially says 10. As I previously stated, this is L's personal percentage that he uses, and whenever a number is thrown out, it means he's damn near certain that he's correct. Only in this case, L didn't know who was Kira, but he was very very certain that Kira was amongst one of these families. And I mean, look at the evidence and really see what I've been saying. It's kind of obvious. L and Tsurucho then start the surveillance, but Tsurucho is only really around to be calmed down. L is perfectly capable of analyzing the monitors by himself. He doesn't need anyone. Due to Whammy House's students being able to absorb large amounts of quantity of information at a time. However, Light is able to outsmart L by using the door handle trap to confirm that someone was in his room. This doesn't mean that he's safe from L because he's found to be far too suspicious. He makes the effort to appear perfect, but by doing so, he just looks even stranger. He blatantly reads the fake magazine in front of the camera, publicly mocks L in his kitchen for being an idiot, and much more. L can't help but begrudgingly respect Light's talent, as he calls him very smart, and any sort of praise from the smartest person on the planet is very reassuring. Bear in mind, Light is only 17 and keeping up with L, whom I've established to be pretty nuts, and it's well, pretty damn impressive. As L says himself, it's like he's trying to force people into believing that he has nothing to hide, but that just makes him even more sus. Before, when I mentioned L testing Light and him mocking L for his attempt at baiting Kira, I have to mention the point where L figures out that Light is Kira, and it is in that moment. L plays a broadcast which states, Interpol to send a total of 1,500 detectives from various countries to Japan to help solve the Kira case. L proposed this strategy because he believed it would make Kira suspicious, maybe even nervous, and cause him to slip up or just do something that would lead to the task force catching him. This was stated when he first met with the task force originally. However, Light literally just can't help himself. He publicly mocks L as he calls out the fact that this broadcast is idiotic and Kira would see through something like this, specifically saying, this is just a ruse to pressure Kira, but it's pretty obvious, so I bet that Kira's figured it out too, and he's smiling while saying that. Mirroring Light's cheeky attitude, L also smiles and giggles, or laughs, or whatever, cackles, which signals L now for the first time in the series thus far that he knows Light is Kira. He knows because this is exactly what Kira would do. It's exactly what he would do, that being L. He would do this. He'd publicly mock someone like this. It's egotistical. And rather, Light himself knows that he's actually talking to L. It's a subtle hint in the entire series. Light already knows that L can know he's Kira all he wants, unconsciously or consciously. What matters is whether he can prove it. For Light to stop L, he has to get close to him by any means necessary. And L knows this, so that's why he laughs and calls Tsurucho's son very smart. And if you look at the Death Note guidebook, it states that L will not test the task force as he deems them to be too stupid to be Kira. He sees Kira to be very intelligent, alongside childish, and hates to lose. His profile is set. After the infamous potato chip scene, Light believes that he's convinced L to get off his back, but all he's managed to do is have L hyperfixate on him. He has no interest in the Kitamura family, because as far as he's concerned, Light is Kira. He fits the description, checks all the boxes, and L's intuition is screaming at him to investigate it. He decides that if he wants to get close to Light, he needs to enroll in the same university that he does. He becomes a college student at To'o University, but needs to solve an exam that he had zero prior study on. As I stated in the start of the video, it's a pretty insane feat. Another argument for him not trying is him being forced to sit upright, which he states later on that such an odd posture for him will lower his deductive reasoning by 40%. Whether or not you think that's a joke and has some major impact on L's intellect is up to you, but obviously there's a clear difference between overall intelligence and deductive reasoning. L then decides to test Light's reactions by approaching him and outright confirming that he is L. Light is actually able to stay calm, but inwardly he is panicking. This move could have won L the entire game, because 1. Light isn't just allowed to react. The faintest reaction will be marked down by L, and not to mention, if he's innocent, it should have no effect on him. Maybe you could argue that most people would just be surprised if the legendary L approached them, but it would more so be excitement or surprise, not panicking and sweating. 2. If Light gets angry and decides to write the alias Hideki Ryuga, he may think of the pop star and kill him instead. That'll confirm to the police that Light is Kira, which will lead to his arrest. Light, however, is able to remain completely calm. This doesn't lower L's suspicion, however, but it does embarrass Light. L was able to outsmart him and put him in an uncomfortable position. Not only that, but Light is strangely quiet for most of it. He can't kill L or do anything to him, and he's not even 100% sure if that is the real L. This only motivates Light even further and ramps up his determination to defeat L, as he regains his composure and decides to use this loss as an opportunity to get closer to L and learn as much as he can. After this, nothing major really happens. There is the tennis game, but as L stated, it won't serve to do much in regard to gathering evidence evidence that Light equals Kira. There is also L's deductive reasoning test, but I'll go more in depth on that in my future Death Note analysis video. Yes, there are still things I will hold off on speaking on. Despite Death Note's length, the writing and foreshadowing is really well done, and is the foundation for all smart characters coming out now. Anyways, what I do want to go over, however, is how L is able to single-handedly put Light into checkmate and force him to wipe his own mind to win. Light meets Misa, a user of the notebook who happens to have access to the Shinigami eyes. This allows her to see the real name of anyone she looks at, which Light decides to use in order to take L down. Even better, Rem, a Shinigami, agrees to kill L for Light. It all seems too easy, but Light decides to go with the flow. However, in the background, L is setting it all up. He analyzes the forensic DNA recovered from the second Kira tapes, before he outright tells Srucho that if he dies within the next few days, his son is Kira. He sets this up as reassurance in order to prevent Light from smooth sailing through it all, as originally Light had planned to just have killed L and be done with it all. After this, he takes the aggressive approach once again, and meets Light on campus, relaying the same message that he told his father. This causes Light to freeze because now he can't exactly kill L. He decides to taunt Light even further by claiming that he isn't the only one who calls himself L, and there's actually a whole group of investigators that call themselves L. This is obviously a lie, but it rattles Light and causes him to overthink. Even worse, Misa arrives out of nowhere and makes contact with L. Light believes he's doomed, but realizes he's actually in the clear because Misa can use her eyes to figure out L's real name. Just as Light begins to relish in the prospect of victory, L begins to smile. It's right then and there that he deduces that Misa is the second Kira. Mogi has been following Light for ages, and never reported him having a girlfriend like her until now. One thing to note, especially since moments like L saying, "Light, you're my only friend I've ever had," shows L's acting ability, which isn't ever pointed out. His acting is so good that Light never questions this behavior as, "Oh look, it's goofy L doing goofy things again." In quote, "If it's my friendship that he wants, then he will get it," end quote. And Light just watches L Gestamaxing with Misa as if that's normal. Which, to be fair to Light, the best manipulation is often mixed with a little bit of truth. And L being an Idol fan isn't wrong, as revealed in L One Day, where L literally attends Idol concerts. But his quote-unquote admiration for Misa was just a means to an end. This shows a bit more of a dark side of L that people never really speak about. His statements usually are done for manipulative purposes, and to lead people along his control. It's stuff like this that actually causes L grief later on, as Aizawa does genuinely feel disrespected by L, and his lack of care. Though some people chalk it down to autism, which is fine. Honestly, I can see that argument. But as the Death Note databook says, L is slightly evil, meaning it's beyond a misunderstanding of his psychological profile and saying that he's just autistic or is on the spectrum. And people misunderstand him, and he's actually just wanting to make friends, which would be wrong. However, slightly being on that spectrum isn't crazy to say though, for sure. There could be that case. Now, this is the main point I'm dragging along. The parallel between Light and L's morale and psychology is to be noted. Narcissism on both ends. One grandiose and the other would be low-key. Perhaps you'd say vulnerable. But what makes him different from Light is his self-awareness. And that allows him to say, "Yo, I am childish and hate losing. I'm a man-child, but I know that." Cue Sabrina Carpenter. This self-awareness, that type of admittance, shows depth in L's writing, which many people don't take. People don't really talk about L's dark side in the mainstream fandom, as diehard L fans love to show L as a goofy, lovable guy, which he is. However, his darkness cannot be ignored, and is fully expressed in his monster speech. His power and status is all that a Kira would want. His power and law enforcement is what Kira later achieves in Part 2 of Death Note. Light's biggest achievement? Well, is getting the United States to bend to Kira's knees. And what had L done? He'd already had the United States bend their knees to him ages ago before Kira. L holds so much power, and Kira later gets that. What I'm making is this parallel. As Kato once put it, a really good YouTuber, doesn't really make content anymore, but he put this perfectly in the video, God of the Old World. A perfect title for L. This really goes into a deeper narrative, as I hinted near the beginning, with L preventing crimes and so forth, with his reputation. While not as effective as Kira, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that he was the prototype for Kira, an absolute control freak, and when someone comes challenging that position, he immediately feels threatened and feels he must go after them. Because remember, L compares his and Kira's thought processes a lot. He always relates to Light during the story. And this comparison isn't made by accident. The writers are clearly establishing L as an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. The old god of the world versus the new god of the world. This can seem like I'm stretching this narrative point, but remove your biases from L aside and see that he is like Light, in the way that all they care about is winning. L is a more stable version and more mature version of Light, but say if L gained the Death Note when he was younger, he probably would have used it and done so with pure power in mind. Perhaps he wouldn't be as focused on the idea of justice as Light was due to his father being a huge influence on him. But Kid L used the word justice. He used it specifically, meaning even back then it's making this parallel, and why Light and L truly are the best dynamics in fiction, and this is due to their hidden layer of depth. But remember, L is slightly evil as stated in Death Note How to Read 13. L does have many good traits about him. He does show remorse to some degree when the second Kira got Ukita. However, an argument can be made if that truly was remorse and regret, or rather frustration at the second Kira, because at that time, L hadn't surmised a second Kira, so he actually saw this as the OG Kira playing dirty outside the original rules that he had set, with needing a name and face to kill, and now seemingly getting out of this pattern. He also seems to somewhat feel bad for Aizawa, but it's really hard to tell. The Change the World novel does change L's character a bit, and it shows L as someone who values justice and is actually more morally upright than his manga counterpart. I do like the idea of L just being a good dude at heart, but to ignore these nuances of his character would actually diminish how well written he is. A further point to prove L and Light being two sides of the same coin is the fact that Nier never boosted Light up to be some godlike figure, and rather just a crazy serial killer. For Nier, Light wasn't just some fun intellectual matchup he could have fun with. He wanted to destroy him and humiliate him. While he does reference the Battle of Pride, the Battle of Egos, he isn't in it as much as L ever was. Light points it out that he's nothing like L, and that doesn't only mean in intelligence, it also means in his philosophy. Nier actually seems to value justice, despite seemingly being a highly detached and sociopathic person. He's also nuanced. His understanding of moral complexity on the objective and subjective basis of good and evil, what is right and wrong, and if there is a god, with the author using Nier to present his own message on answering good and evil, which Death Note never really goes out of its way to answer and rather leaves you to speculate. Anyways, long tangent aside, L refuses to waste time and calls in the police to have Misa taken into custody before he taunts Light and breaks the news to him. In just a few moves, Light is now backed into a corner. He has to figure out a way to prove Misa's innocence, despite the fact that her DNA was found on videotapes linked to Kira. He has to prove his own innocence, and if he doesn't move fast, Rem will kill him. From here, Light has no choice but to enact the memory loss plan. He has to give up ownership of the notebook, lose his own memories, and restart the hunt for the notebook. He proves his innocence via the fake 13-day rule, which suggests a user of the Death Note dies if they don't write in it after 13 days. Light is even able to pass the last test, which involves Srucho threatening to kill him, but nothing happens. L hypothesizes that if Misa were Kira, she wouldn't hesitate to kill Srucho in order to save Light's life. With this, Light and Misa's imprisonment is now over, though L still decides to survey Light by having him chained to him 24/7. L at this point in the story is totally confused and actually falls into a depression of sorts. This all stems from the realization that early on, L made up his mind that he wanted Light to be Kira. Despite observing both the Kitamura and Yagami family, he's only focused on Light. He could have chosen to watch the Kitamura family, but has Mogi do it. L detests Kira, but still finds him interesting. This is why he has a literal crisis when there is a possibility that Light isn't Kira, and he doesn't know what to think. He stops working for a whole 2 months, and he doesn't even bother to do anything else but sulk. He keeps Light around, not in order to prove his innocence or keep up their friendship, but in order to keep a close eye on him. L doesn't like Light as a person, literally rolling his eyes at Memory Wipe's Light's speeches on morality or manipulating women. Simply put, L likes what Light can bring to the table, an opponent that can push L to his limits. After having a brawl, the two decide to work together to recover the Death Note, which leads them to the Yotsuba group. They corner Higuchi, Light touches the notebook, and regains his memory. He's able to kill him via writing his name in blood, which leads Light getting back his memories. I also want to add that L's intuition is so cracked that it allows him to figure out something as complex as learning to pilot a helicopter on the fly with no formal training. Learning to fly an aircraft takes years of practice, especially to become a professional. Yet L is able to do this instantaneously and says it's so simple that Light could probably do it, if that is true or not. Right after Light regains his memories, L knows something is wrong. His intuition screams at him because of how off things are. L's expression becomes sharper than before, the clock ticking becomes louder, and he stays quieter, reserving to constantly think. After speaking to Rem, he's able to get her to slip up and use her words to confirm the existence of the Shinigami eyes. But it's seemingly meaningless, as the 13-day rule exonerates both Light and Misa. However, L is in denial of this rule, and believes there's more to it. He decides to test the validity of this rule by having a criminal write down a person's name in the notebook. If they are still alive after 13 days, they are free to go. However, this is what leads to the beginning of the end for L, as this forceful scenario is exactly what Light wanted. It pushes Rem into a corner and forces her to either 1. Kill Light, which would cause Misa to end her life as she's absolutely obsessed with him, 2. Kill L, which will hand Light the victory, but in turn will also cause Rem to die as she broke the Shinigami rule of killing another person to save someone else's life. Rem decides that Misa's love is the most important gift of all, and proceeds to write L's name in the notebook, alongside Watari's. As L has a heart attack and falls to the ground, he is caught by Light, who simply smirks, confirming his suspicions all along. And let's be honest, L knew. He didn't just think. However, I don't think L was sad in the slightest when he died. If anything, he died happy. The Kira case was the hardest case he ever pursued, and it caused him to doubt himself at multiple times. All he wanted to know was whether or not he was wrong, and thanks to Light's confirmation, L knew that he wasn't crazy and was right all along. So yeah, he could be pretty schizo looking into that supernatural stuff. He feels nothing but acceptance and vindication, and in even later panels you can see a smile on L's face post-death. In the end, L lost to Light, but this doesn't make him dumb. I mean, come on, let alone less intelligent than his opponent. The fact of the matter is, L always knew that Light was Kira. His only true obstacle was proving it. But it was so insanely difficult with the existence of Shinigami and notebooks, which is basically supernatural stuff, right? Light also had a user of the Shinigami eyes on his side and an extra death note at his disposal, whereas L just had his resources, influence, intellect, and money. And I mean, that's not anything to laugh at. But compared to supernatural things, like, come on. From the start, L was at a disadvantage, so the fact that he forces Light to pull off crazy stunts like wiping your own memory says a lot about the kind of threat that L was. The battle was quite literally the highest of diffs, and Light literally had to kill L right then and there. If he didn't, L would have figured out that the 13-day rule was fake, which would have led to Light's arrest. But that didn't happen in the original timeline. L would have no choice but to entrust his hopes to his two successors, Nier and Mello, where one can argue that he actually purposely didn't choose Nier and Mello because he wanted them to battle it out to see who could be the true successor. Yeah, basically testing their abilities after he died. But even after L was succeeded, Nier and Mello on their own would pale in comparison to L. Even Light, for all the feats he pulls off, was never smarter than L. Beating L doesn't make Light more intelligent, it just means that he was able to outwit him with the tools he had at his disposal. Another thing that should be noted, to be able to speculate on anything immaterial or metaphysical beyond what is seen and heard by normal people is genuinely insane level of thinking outside the box. That while it's dumbed down for us the viewer, the idea of even speculating phenomena such as Kira is a feat in itself. Very creative. Not many could rationalize the irrational. Reminds me of another series. Alongside my original points on L's academic level and clear knowledge of the world as he rules over everyone as a king behind the shadows, the best showing of what I'm saying here is the artwork right here with the crown. The fact of the matter is, L was always the smartest human in the verse and will always be. Nobody could ever hope to succeed his natural intellect. That is a gift that cannot be overcome with merely hard work. He is God's intuition, the greatest detective on the planet, and the last one.